Some teams have been relegated upward, so who is the next Cincinnati, UCF, or Tulane? Maybe it's still Tulane. We'll do a group of 5 previews, some disappointing news in terms of nostalgia in college football with the latest from the blind side, and also what's next for the ACC. This is the College Game Day podcast, reporting on Thursday, August 17th. Rece Davis here. Ryan McGee sitting in for Pete Thamel, who is detoxing, recovering, or some such thing from all the realignment news in the recent days. Ryan, glad to have you with us. Always great to see you, my friend. This is a far different cry from when we were together on RPM Tonight.
Yeah, I think I've got an old RPM Tonight mic flag somewhere in my office. I'll have to dig that out. I'm pretty sure you used it to interview, Morgan Shepherd back in the day or something. But yeah, yeah.
The sad thing is you grew up loving car racing, and I didn't follow it, just to be honest. And when they asked me to do RPM Tonight way back in the day, I'd been at ESPN a couple of years, I guess, and I was doing NBA Tonight, which was much more in my wheelhouse. And they called and said, hey, we'd like for you. Kenny Mayne was moving to SportsCenter, and they said, we'd like for you to do RPM Tonight. And I said, okay, but I just want to make one thing clear. If you're thinking, hey, let's get the dude from Alabama to host a car racing show, I said, you've got the wrong guy. I said, I'll learn it and I'll dive in, but you can't bring me in with the expectation that I know the ins and outs in the history. I said, I know who Dale Earnhardt is. I know who Jeff Gordon and Rusty Wallace are. I said, but beyond that, I'm going to have homework to do. And you were one of the ones that helped me immensely in doing that homework and getting up to speed. Or, well, no pun intended, maybe a slight pun intended, but getting up to speed. I had an old car that didn't always run good in terms of my historical knowledge of NASCAR.
Yeah, well, so back in the mid-'90s, there were, I think, 4 Southerners in the entirety of ESPN. It was you, me, we had an editor, Lee McGee from Greenville, South Carolina, and Stu Scott. And at the time, Stu was claiming he was from Brooklyn, not from Greensboro, which is where he actually grew up. So, and I was the only one with a Southern accent. So I literally started ESPN the same week that Jeff Gordon won the first Brickyard 400. So I always tell Jeff, when Jeff retired, I told him, I said, hey, thanks, by the way, for my entire career, because suddenly NASCAR was cool. And they called the guy from Muscle Shoals and the guy from Rockingham and said, we need y'all to work on the auto racing show. It all worked out. And here I remember you and me working on that show. And we said, man, one day, hopefully we can work together on college football. And, we put in the grind, and it only took about 20 years, and here we sit.
Well, see, I learned something as we were prepping for this podcast. You keep it a big secret, mostly because you want to hold people accountable for reading your book of what your age is. But I don't mind saying I've been at ESPN for 28 and a half years now. People, I'm entering my 9th season hosting College Game Day, and now this is, well in excess of 20 seasons of either hosting College Game Day or being in the studio for college football. So that was, I'm glad to be able to work with you on this, and I know you're going to contribute quite a bit to Game Day coming up in the fall as well. So we're excited about that and appreciative for the contributions that you've already made. Let's hit a couple of college football topics here off the top. You said you grew up in North Carolina. Tennessee guy now from by affiliation, but North Carolina guy by birth. How do you view the ACC right now? And what did you make of this divide in terms of the pursuit of Stanford and Cal? Because I thought it made zero sense for the ACC to do so. If they break away and it becomes football, and I don't mean within the conference, but if football breaks away from the rest, and Stanford and Cal become football affiliates with an ACC like that, I don't have a big problem with it. But for everything else, it's kind of ridiculous, and I don't really understand why some of the schools would have wanted to do that. And I certainly understand those who remain steadfast in their opposition to adding Stanford and Cal. No disrespect intended to them. It just does. I don't see where it brings a lot of value to the conference.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I grew up on Tobacco Road. I grew up in the Triangle. I mean, you mentioned my books. Because you wrote the foreword for us. My dad was an ACC football official. I mean, for decades. I mean, he was in the Big East when they started that, but for the most part, I mean, that's where I grew up, was going to ACC football games, and so I'm old school that way. And it's interesting to me, not just with the ACC, but in all of realignment, every time it happens, but particularly with the ACC this time around, is I feel like people, good and bad, find out who they actually are, right? You know, schools sitting there waiting on the phone to ring because they just assume that the SEC is going to call, or they just assume the Big Ten is going to call, and they don't get the call. And I remember for ESPN, the magazine, 12 years ago, I wrote a realignment story about super conferences, talked to Roy Kramer, and per the usual, he was right about where it all ended up, 12 years later. But I remember interviewing Bill Self and Rick Pitino and these basketball coaches whose schools were going to change conferences. At the time, we thought half the Big 12 was going to go to the Pac-12. And I remember those basketball coaches saying to me, no one's even come down here and asked me what I think. And there were schools that said, no one's called us and asked us what we think about all this. And so I think maybe in the case of a Florida State, or in the case of some of these schools, they've kind of figured out that you are who you think you are, and then you are who everyone else thinks you are. And so it's been interesting watching that happen. And as far as I don't know where the logistics go anymore. I was in LA back in May, and this guy was dressed in all his USC stuff, and he saw me at the airport, and he goes, "What are we doing?" And I go, I don't know. I really don't know. And so, I mean, I know what you're doing. You're chasing the money. But in the case of the ACC, I'll tell you this. I don't want to hear any more about academics, because
Amen.
If anybody says they don't have a place for Cal and Stanford, the academics clearly don't matter. It's about all the other stuff. And so the logistics make zero sense. If you had to do it to survive, I get it, even if it's just temporary, if you're the ACC, if you're Cal and Stanford, because right now it's just a game of survival. But that's a really long way of saying, yeah, it didn't make any sense. But had it happened, I would have been like, okay, whatever. I mean, Rutgers and UCLA are going to play volleyball. So that's the world we're living in. So, maybe UCLA, maybe Cal and Stanford made sense.
Taylor and Sarah, our great producers, have heard me rant about this before. The academic thing, I've got no patience for. Being a member of the American Association of Universities, or whatever it is that makes the presidents feel better, I've got no patience for that. I'm not anti-academics. I mean, I have one son who graduated undergrad from an Ivy League institution and then got 2 graduate degrees from Duke while playing sports. Okay.
Yeah.
I've got a daughter who, went to NYU, who used to be a basketball power back in the day, and now I think they're D3 in most everything, and she doesn't really follow sports. Academics are important. But this idea that you have to be associated and like-minded or we can't play football against you is stupid. It's beyond. And if you're calling yourself high-minded, some bastion of academic integrity, and yet you said, well, I can't really do any research on this stem cell because you're not in the same conference I am. That's stupid. Yeah. You can research with whoever you want to. Now, I'm not saying, I understand that when you are in that conference that sometimes they might facilitate some cooperation. That's fine. I'm not against that part of it. But to say that, well, we can't make this affiliation or we can't make this arrangement because we don't have similar goals academically, that's dumb. Work with whoever you want to academically to do research or get grants or whatever. And if it happens to be in the same athletic conference, go ahead. Nobody's stopping you. It's great. But to say we can't let this, program A or program B, or in the case of Stanford and Cal, that we need to add them because of their high-minded academia, is preposterous. This is a business. It is. Whether we like it or not, and sooner or later, football's going to break away. And, you brought up Bill Self. I remember talking to Bill during that earlier round of realignment, and him being, because he's a big football fan. He loves football, and he's really savvy and a really smart guy. But I think even he was taken aback that at that time, there was a good chance Kansas was going to kind of get left out in the weeds, sort of like Washington State and Oregon State have right now. So it's really interesting. All of these relegation models that people have put up for football over the years that I've laughed at and said it wouldn't work, or it's, there's no need for it, has sort of happened. Now, it's been unfortunate because the Stanford fans will draw back to the years leading up to the Kirby Smart era at Georgia and draw the parallel in wins and losses and accomplishments between Stanford and Georgia, and pure numbers when, David Shaw really elevated what Jim Harbaugh had laid the foundation for and built. And there are, Stanford accomplished a ton. They were regulars in Rose Bowls. They were perennial contenders to get into the then BCS. Yeah. Well, we could argue about that. I jumped somebody in a National Football Foundation meeting earlier because this whole false narrative that Christian McCaffrey didn't win the Heisman because he plays on the West Coast is preposterous. Go back and look, and I'll tell you why. Now, two different arguments. The first argument, if you say Christian McCaffrey should have beaten Derrick Henry for the Heisman, and that's your opinion, you think he was a better player, that's a justifiable position. I've got no qualm with that. That's up to you. But to say he didn't get enough attention is ridiculous. Go back and look at his first month of the season. He scored one touchdown the entire first month of the season. Yeah. Now, he did okay. I think he might have had a 100-yard rushing game, maybe. Maybe he had a kick return or something too. But it wasn't the first month, he wasn't really on the radar. But from October until the end of the season, he got so much attention that he almost did, and then people thought he should have won the Heisman. Somebody saw him, so it's like two separate arguments. People saw him, so don't say that. Don't say that. If you want to say it was better, go ahead. That's fine. But don't say it was because people didn't see him. That's not true.
Yeah, I always tell everyone, I had never been to Stanford in my life, and I went there 3 times that year. So that's how simply because of him. So that's how little attention. When he moved to Charlotte and played for the Panthers, I ran into him at the grocery store, and he's like, "Man, you came and saw me all the time, and I never saw you again." I go, "Well," but yeah, that's how little attention that he received was all of a sudden I was on airplanes, to the Bay Area 3 times. But to your point earlier, my frustration when it comes to realignment is, and I feel this way a lot of times, and it kind of goes to this idea of high-minded academics, is I hate it when they treat us like we're stupid. I hate it when, we talk to someone or someone releases a statement or we watch a press conference or whatever, and then they say things like, because I grew up on college campuses. My dad was a university president. He was on NCAA committees. I mean, I know how all this works. And so when someone sits there and says to me, well, we didn't do this because of this guy wasn't a member of this academic association, or we didn't do this because of whatever, I'm sitting there, or we made this move because of so-and-so, and then the same conference that said we can't take so-and-so because they're not on the same level as the rest of us academically, and then I see who they've added since. Mm-hmm. And then don't look at me and tell me that your reasoning is still the same. I'm a smart guy. You're a smart guy. We all that follow this game, you can't follow football and not have some level of intelligence. Don't lie to me. Just, don't, as I got a teenager in the house. Don't gaslight me, right? That's what, just tell me the truth. That's fine. You're chasing money. You're chasing market size. I get it. You're trying to get out ahead of TV contracts and trying to get out ahead of the other conference. Just tell me that. But don't try to paint this as, oh, no, we want to make sure that so-and-so is the right fit when we all get together for our meetings in Myrtle Beach. Whatever. Just tell me with the truth, because we're all probably going to know what it is anyway.
You know what, Ryan, I don't think that they are purposely trying to lie to us. Maybe I'm a little naive there. I think they're sort of lying to themselves. I think it makes them feel better about the mission. Yeah. And then when they get backed into a corner because somebody makes a financial decision to move away from them, then they have to backfill it. Then they become a little more open to compromise.
Whatever helps you sleep at night, right? It's a cliche for a reason.
I really didn't mean to take us down that rabbit hole as much, but I was really interested in what you thought about the ACC and the realignment. And, the date has passed now. Florida State's going to stick around at least for another year or until something else happens. The offseason, even leading up to the days to begin the season, always bring, these kind of incredible stories on the offside, and the dispute between Michael Oher, the former Ole Miss great, terrific NFL player, and the Tuohy family, who took him in, as everyone knows, from the Blindside movie, and the dispute over how much money the Tuohys have made, whether a conservatorship has taken advantage of Michael Oher financially, and the dispute on both sides of it, with both attorneys from each side making claims that that the other is either erroneous or has unfairly taken advantage of it, has really been disappointing, because you wanted to believe that everything was good in that story. And being around this, Ryan, you've probably heard that there had been a little distance between Michael Oher and the Tuohys because of this. I don't think that Michael, from what I've been able to garner, has ever been a huge fan of the movie. And I understand why. I think if you go another level down in that character in that movie, and I'm not here to break down the movie, but I think one of the contentions that's been made recently, and one of the things that had bothered Michael initially, is that his character was portrayed as unintelligent. I think if you really watch that movie closely, it's not the case. At least I didn't take it that way. I thought that, it was pretty obvious that once you got past the shyness, that he was not portrayed that way. However, if you were the character, if the character was based on you, I can understand how you might not love the way that whole thing came out. So I have a degree of empathy there, I guess, for how he might feel about the movie. I don't know how all of this is going to come out, but I know that from that particular story and the movie and the book and who made money, and I hope that everybody gets what they're entitled to. But I think it's really unfortunate, because that was such a unifying, feel good type of story between the Tuohy family and Michael Oher. To see it devolve into now what's going to become a legal battle is kind of sad, and I hate to see it.
Yeah, and so my perspective on this is my family, right? My wife and daughter, who do not live by the box score by any stretch, but they love stories. If they love GameDay because they love to watch the features, they don't really care about the preview of whatever so and so is going to do in the cover 2 that day.
Tell them thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, I love all of it.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, but the point is that it's such it's an Oscar-winning film. It's such an incredibly popular film. The book is a milestone book, when it comes to research, is almost everything that Michael Lewis does. But I say all that because I watch my family react to the news. You mentioned Pete Thamel, so I'm on the emails, right? Of all the emails going back and forth between all the ESPN.com writers and editors about, hey, this story's breaking, what do we do with it? I knew about it in the morning. And they didn't. Then I watched the two of them the rest of the day. Like, when are they going to find out? Because I'm not going to tell them. And they were devastated. And the reason is because it casts a shadow. No matter what happens from here on, it casts a shadow of doubt on this story that has touched so many people. The Tuohy family, they have made a living, speaking at motivational events and speaking at these big conferences, and it's all based on this story. And so it's touched the lives of so many people between the book and the movie and everything that's happened since then. And Michael's written a couple books. He was in Oxford doing a book signing, I think, just 2 days ago. And so that's the part that's tough to watch, is to watch the people who have found inspiration in this story when the veneer's ripped off of it. And that's tough to watch.
And I think a really important thing for people in our position is something that our profession doesn't do a very good job of right now, candidly, is it is our job to get as many facts as early as we possibly can and then react to them. And in this landscape of media, it's okay to have an opinion on it. But I would say that it would be really important in a case like this, given everything that's happening in our society and the divisiveness on virtually any front you can imagine right now, we would be wise as people in the media to let a few more facts play out here and then make whatever judgment you're going to make. Because the claims on both sides are pretty desperate right now. There's a long gulf in between. And if truth lies in the middle, then maybe you can make the judgment. And certainly if truth is on one side or the other, then that becomes a pretty easy judgment. But I saw a ton of people immediately gravitate to one side or the other. People had the inclination to jump to one side or the other and decide that version of the facts absolutely has to be true. Patience in stories like this, so you don't get you don't assign yourself to a position that might not age well. But I think the most important thing is sort of what you said, because my daughter, much like your wife and daughter, is a beyond casual sports fan, very, very casual. She likes her brother's baseball team, and because we're a house divided in terms of allegiance, Alabama, Auburn, from where my wife and I went to school, my daughter wants Alabama to beat Auburn so she doesn't have to listen to it from her mother and brother. And other than that's all she really cares about. But she loves The Blind Side. She'll watch it. She'll run across it somewhere. She'll watch it. She'll pull it up, on whatever streaming service it's on. She'll watch it because she loves the story. And that part of it is extremely unfortunate. Whatever the resolution is, I hope there's some patience shown by those of us in the media. Totally unconnected to this. And I think I've met Sean Tuohy maybe once or twice. I've met his son on the sideline, who I think is now working at UCF. I met him when he was working at Ole Miss. So I don't know the Tuohy family at all, other than just casual meetings. But I was once mistaken for Sean Tuohy when he played at Ole Miss.
What?
I went. A buddy of mine, a high school teammate of mine, and I used to always make it a point to go to the SEC basketball tournament when it was in Birmingham, or it was in Nashville a couple of times back in the day at Memorial Gym, or Memorial Coliseum in Vanderbilt. And we would always go. And this year it was in Birmingham, and I played at Muscle Shoals. And as you would do in the early '80s, I had on my Letterman's jacket, and our colors were red and black, and had Big M on it, right? So Georgia and Ole Miss had played in the SEC tournament. So my buddy and I had gone over to this hotel, which was, connecting there, see who you can see and all that stuff. And there was this guy who played for Georgia named Donald Hartree, really, really skinny guy. So you knew immediately, who he was. And he comes up and he starts talking to me. We're just sort of chatting or whatever. And then finally, he sort of, pats me on the back and says, "Hey, nice game today, Tuohy." And I was like,
"Thanks, dude." Thanks, man.
I was like, okay, all right.
That's amazing.
I appreciate it. So
hey,
that's my connection.
And in related news, I'm frequently mistaken for Tim McGraw. So there you go.
There you go.
No.
By Faith Hill or by others?
Yeah. In my '90s dreams, yes, by Faith Hill. But no,
good catch there. '90s dreams. You don't want Mrs. McGee seeing that, right?
No. But yeah, that's amazing though. Yeah, you should have said thanks, man.
I did. I just said thanks, man. It just because I was like, I'm not going to bother to try to.
Like that was an awesome rebound I pulled down late in the game there. Yeah, I was crashing the boards. That's fantastic. But I'll say this: to the point, your point about the people's reaction to the story. There's that great scene in the film, right, where Sandra Bullock, playing Ms. Tuohy, is at the country club, and all those ladies act like they act, and everyone's so appalled. How could? All right, don't be that. That's my only advice: is don't be the ladies at the country club table. As you're just to Rece's point, wait, get the information, and don't be the people that you booed in the movie theater. There
will be differing opinions, whatever the resolution of this is. But at least before you assign yourself to the extreme on either side, wait it out, see what happens. But when you're getting ready to make predictions about teams, it's much better to assign yourself to an extreme side. We've been doing conference previews, Ryan, and we're going to go group of 5 today.
Heck yeah, we are.
We've had some teams, that have been upwardly mobile, who've made waves, whether it's making BCS bowls, making New Year's Six, Cincinnati, UCF, who are now out of that mix. Tulane last year won the Cotton Bowl, beat USC, and Tulane comes into this one of the favorites, one would think, in the American. And I think they've got 6 starters back on offense. They did lose Tyjae Spears, who was sensational for them last year. But they come in here with Willie Fritz coming off that 12-win season, the massive turnaround. But I do offer this point of caution, this note of caution. The last time Tulane had a double-digit winning season, 1998, undefeated under Tommy Bowden, they went 3-8 the next season. Now, they did have a coaching change, so that there are some extenuating circumstances, and they fought off potential suitors to keep their quarterback, Michael Pratt, who had a 3,000-yard passing season, did a good job taking care of the football and can run a little bit. What do you think of Tulane going into this season? Will they be the one that repeats in this final incarnation of the college football playoff, where the highest-ranked group of 5 champion ends up making a New Year's Six Bowl?
I think they're the leading candidate, and I give Willie Fritz a lot of credit because you just referenced it, the suitors, right? He kept the core. They were going to lose a group of guys to graduation. That's fine, but the fact that you kept your quarterback and you kept the core group of athletes. Lane Kiffin said something. Our Marty McGee talking season specials have been on the last couple nights on SEC Network, and Lane Kiffin said something to us at SEC Media Days that has really rattled me. And what he was talking about was that what's missing from college football in this age of transfers is he worries about, he said, what he loved about college football versus the pros, and of course we all remember he coached the Raiders, was the fact that people actually want to be where they are in college. Like you were recruited and you signed there and you got guys in the room that grew up wanting to play for that team. But he said, we're losing that. He said, I look around the Ole Miss locker room and I got a handful of guys that grew up wanting to play for Ole Miss, but for the most part, I got a lot of guys coming in from other places. I got a lot of guys, it's just a business transaction. This group at Tulane, they want to be there. And that's why they stayed. And so to me, it's all about you. I walk in, you know this too. You walk into a locker room, if you're there for a practice in the middle of the week, you know immediately. If you go to the practice field, you know immediately the chemistry of the group. And is it just a bunch of athletes that have been quilted together, or is it an actual team? And what I love about that Tulane group when I was around them last year is that they want to be there and they built something. And so the fact that that core group stayed when they all had an opportunity to go somewhere else and turn Tulane into the AAA affiliate to whoever, which has happened to so many other schools, the fact that they've kept that group together is why I think they're the leading candidate. If anyone's going to crash the party, they're the ones. So I think they've got a chance to repeat. And the fact that the coach is still there helps. I think what Willie's done is amazing.
He's a terrific coach, and I really thought that there was one particular Power 5 job that I thought he was going to get.
Yep.
And didn't work out, largely because he decided he wanted to stay until the end with Tulane. He showed a little bit of that type of loyalty to these guys that they ended up showing to him. They do have some transfers coming in to help them, but they have a couple of new coordinators too, because they're not coming back completely intact. And their win total is 9.5. And though I really like this team and I like Pratt, they start with South Alabama, who we'll probably touch on in just a minute. Then they've got Ole Miss, albeit at home at the end. Then they've got UTSA, who's a newcomer in the American this year, who we're also going to talk about that I really like. The win total is 9.5. Over under. I'm going under, just because that's only 9-3. They pulled some out. They've got enough change. There's enough parity, as it were, and then the Ole Miss game. I'm gonna take the under there. I still think they'll be good and still have a chance to be the highest ranked group of 5 champion. But I think probably 9-3 sounds like a solid season. Anything better than that would be pretty significant. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think under barely, just because again what the schedule is. But can we just talk for a minute about the fact that we live in a world where the Tulane UTSA game, which is the last weekend of the season. Dude, again, I say this, people ask about the bottom 10. I write the bottom 10. I'm actually today working on the preseason bottom 10 for next week. People ask about that thing. And the best part, and this is why I love talking about these teams. the best part of writing the bottom 10 is when a team that I have written about for years, it's like sending them off to college when all of a sudden they're good. So when Tulane, who I called Tulane, for years, or UTSA, ROCK in the UTSA, do you understand? Like, we always talk about the challenge of how do we come up with different things to write and report about Alabama, right? Or Georgia or Ohio State. These teams are always good. Well, how about coming up with new stuff to write about UTSA for 8 years when they're winning 2 games a year, and now they got a chance to win a 3rd straight conference championship. I mean, it's the single best part of the job. It's why I get so excited about these teams, because so many of these teams I've written about when they were bad, and then watching them win. When Georgia State started going to bowl games, it was one of the greatest experiences of my career, because I watched so much of their football when they were bad, and now they're good. And so so I just wanted to touch on the fact that the UTSA Tulane game, that's going to be a gigantic football game, rivalry weekend. I cannot wait for it.
Well, and a couple of games in September might make that game even bigger, or it'll be a big game in the American.
Sure.
And that's a distinct difference. The one game that I mentioned is second weekend of the season when Tulane hosts Ole Miss. And the other one is UTSA going to Tennessee. Now, I know how that sounds, but that's a sandwich game for the Vols. It's after Florida and before South Carolina. And South Carolina for Tennessee, after what happened last year, that is a classic look-ahead game. And so then you get UTSA in there coming in on the 23rd in between with all of those veterans and Frank Harris, who's played quarterback there forever. And now UTSA is another team as they move up in conference affiliation, moving up into the American after winning Conference USA last year. And, Harris even – did you know Frank Harris had LASIK in the offseason? He'd been having some issues with his contacts. So he had LASIK. So as razor sharp as he's been at times, I think it was 42 touchdowns and 14 picks
couldn't
last
see.
year. He might think about
see.
now that he can see.
He was like,
what he's gonna do.
I think that's my guy over there. I'll just throw it over here and see what happens. Now he actually knows. Yeah, it's like my mother-in-law for years. She told everybody she could see fine, and then she had cataract surgery. All of a sudden, she picked up the newspaper, and was like, "Oh wow!" I go,
yeah.
You haven't been able to read all this time. So yeah, no, it's funny because this happens. So you figure, and I'll have it in front of me. You figure Tennessee probably scheduled that UTSA game. I don't know, the way they schedule now. It might have been 10 years ago when or even 5. But even if it was 5 years ago, UTSA was winning 2 games a year. So you're thinking, all right, you know what? We're going to get us an FCS game. We're going to plug it in there, announce the homecoming court, and then we'll get ready for South Carolina. And all of a sudden, you scheduled this game however long ago, and now you're watching, and UTSA has got a chance to go undefeated last week, and they're winning conference championships. You're like, wait, this isn't the easy out that we thought it was. But it also help your resume. Now they'll take credit for that. We scheduled tough, man.
Now, they did lose their star wide receiver, Zachary Franklin, who, if I can harken back to your earlier comments with Lane Kiffin, apparently grew up his entire life hoping to play for Ole Miss. So, no, I'm joking. But he had 15
I was going to roll with it. I was like, all right, okay, I'm not sure about this.
No, I'm being a little snarky about that. But I understand it. I don't mean to cast aspersions. Those are the rules you make. I totally understand Lane's point. And at the same time, if those are the rules you're going to put in place, you can't exactly expect him to sit back and go, no, I'm going to take the high road here and only take the young guys who grew up dreaming of going hotty-toddy. I get it. So, but that is a loss, and it is a security blanket type receiver for Frank Harris. But they return a lot of guys. They've got a guy, Trey Moore, who's a disruptor, a bunch of sacks, had a bunch of tackles for loss, should be good up on the defensive front. We're going to know a lot about them in terms of the big picture about whether they are the it team this year, like Tulane was last year, like UCF, like Western Michigan's been in other years, because they open at Houston, the Tennessee game that we've mentioned, and then Tulane at the end of the season. So The win total for them, perhaps because they're moving up in conference affiliation, is only 7.5.
Yeah.
And they are at FAU and Tom Herman taking over there. They're at North Texas. I'll drill the over on this. I'm going to take the over on UTSA at 7.5. How about you?
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. You got Tulane late. They don't have to play SMU during the regular season. Yeah, no, it's they're catching Army kind of at the right time. No, I'm with you. I'll take the over on that all day long.
And at the end, right now, if you had to pick Justin, the American right now, are those the two teams? Are those the two best teams? You have Cincinnati, Houston, UCF gone. Tulane obviously is the returning champion. Are those the two best teams in the conference, and will ultimately, you might see them play a couple times, as we've seen in years past with the American.
Yeah, and I think the team that could crash that is SMU. I mentioned them briefly. I was going through my notes last week, and I had them penciled in at like 8-4, and so that's a chance for a team that can mess it up. I mean, it's funny with the American, they've kind of got that wad of teams right there in the middle, like East Carolina. They could win 9 games or they could win 4 games, and to me, I would put FAU in that group. I'd put Memphis in that group. There are a lot of teams in there that I don't believe are good enough to win the conference, but I think they're certainly good enough to ruin a bigger picture, for these other two teams that we're talking about. So, but I think to me, it's Tulane, UTSA, and then I think that you got SMU sitting there, and then you got that group of teams that are all 7-5, 6-6. And by the way, how about our boy JT Daniels? By the way, he's going to be running around in that conference. He's first of all, I love that guy. I've had some of the most insightful conversations with him, but this will be his 4th FCS starting job at Rice. That's the craziest. That's the most 2023 stat I can possibly come up with. And he's really good. When he's on, he's really good. And so, Rice might win 5 games, but I wouldn't put it past JT Daniels to, again, screw up someone's season right in the middle of October with suddenly, looking like the guy that we all think he can be.
And that probably is the one thing that might open the door. I think the American prior to the defections had sort of been, along with the Mountain West to some degree, but mainly the American with the emergence of Cincinnati and UCF had sort of felt like the next tier beyond the Power 5.
Yeah.
And those types of teams that can mess things up could allow someone like, say, Boise State to be the highest ranked champion from the group of 5. Andy Avalos there sort of got things going later on in the season. They have a sensational quarterback in Talon Green, who was Mountain West Freshman of the Year last year. They've got a couple of really good running backs, and George Helani, who finally kept his knees healthy last year and went for over 1,000 yards. Ashton Genty is kind of a speed back for them. Got a couple of solid receivers, solid on the defensive side. They were like plus 182 yards per game in Mountain West play. Now they did lose, lost Fresno State in the Mountain West title game. They've got 8 super seniors on that team, and I know we've sort of forgotten about Boise State the last few years because they've been good, not great. What do you make of the Broncos right now and their opportunity perhaps to be that G5 team this year?
Well, they're going to make a statement early, one way or the other, because they go to Washington and they host UCF, and I don't know. As a Floridian now, you can tell me what the altitude situation is, but I don't believe that the altitude in Orlando is what it is in Boise. So the weather's certainly not the same. So but that's a chance, even if they were to win one of those two. That's a chance for them to get back on the radar. And this is what we found with these teams is what you do in September determines what we think about you the rest of the year. And so if they were to take care of a Washington team that we all, I think, can agree is going to be pretty good. And then obviously UCF is a brand name. There's a chance there, to make a statement early, or there's a chance to go 0-2 after 2 weeks, and we'll just, we'll check in with you at the Potato Bowl.
I think they're good. And I try not to make predictions based on schedule all the time, because if you're not good enough, a loss will find you.
Right.
But I do think they start 0-2, because I think Washington and UCF are both better than they are. And as you glance down their schedule, they've got a couple of tough, tricky road trips, and they still go to Memphis too, who is capable. Memphis has been up and down. They can win that game, but that's not a lock. They have to go to San Diego State in the conference. They have to go to Colorado State. They go to Fresno State and Utah State at the end. So they've got some difficult road trips in the conference, with those two big time non-conference games against UW and UCF. I'm going to have to take the under barely. I think this feels like 8-4. It feels like 8-4 for them.
And that was initially when I first started looking at them back in the spring, I even had them as high as 10 wins. But the closer we get to the year, I'm with you, because what I initially looked at was the fact that they had Wyoming at home, they had Air Force at home at the end of the year, and I'm like, all right, that's two good ones to have at the house. But then and having UCF at home, but then I realized all those road games that you're talking about. So yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. I think Air Force has a chance to win 9 games. Fresno's probably an 8-win team. This is not an easy conference. San Diego State's always, they're always San Diego State. All San Diego State does is win 8 games a year and go to a bowl game every year, and rush for 500,000 yards. And so it's it'll be interesting to watch. But Boise's going to win the conference. The problem is I just don't know that they're going to have enough to, create the resume that they invented for everyone else, which is crashing the party when we get to January.
Okay, so that's Boise State. There are a couple of other teams from the state of Alabama who have really elevated. Let's take a look at Troy.
Yeah,
Troy Trojans, really, really good defensive team. Troy under John Summerall in his second year. They're hoping to open up the offense a little bit more this year. They got Asa Martin, who transferred from Memphis. He was at Auburn before then. They've got a defensive tackle named T.J. Jackson, who was just a stud.
He's
and
a
then
dude.
In the secondary, Reddy Stewart had 3 picks last year. They were top 10 in the country in scoring defense last year. And I will test my colleagues on GameDay, because I'm going to give away the answer here. Second longest winning streak to the 2-time reigning national champion Georgia Bulldogs belongs to the Troy Trojans.
How about that?
Won 11 in a row.
Yeah. How about that? That's a bar bet that you would have won. You're going to win everywhere except for maybe. I think you'd still win it if you were on the Troy campus. Yeah. I don't think they got that one. But it's and again, I put South Alabama, as I call them, USA. I put them in that group of schools that, again, I felt like I sent them off to college because they were scuffled forever, and now playing for conference championships, bottom 10 graduates. We always appreciate that. But yeah, what they've built, and those schools, it's always been an interesting thing, because Alabama is such this super sun with this gravitational pull, right? And then you got Auburn over on the other side of the state, and as you know, they've also worked very hard to make football tough on other publicly funded universities in that state over the years. No offense, Bear Bryant Jr. But
you can't just say no offense and expect him not to take offense. It's too late for that.
It's like Talladega Nights, right? When you say no offense, you can say whatever you want right after that. That's not how it works. But to see UAB and to see South Alabama and to see Troy, build programs within football crazy state, even when a lot of forces were working against them, is I so much enjoy that. And so to watch them, the problem South Alabama and Troy has is the same division, so that part of it. And then more than likely your reward is you're going to play Coastal Carolina, for a championship. But it's, but the fact that they've built what they've built in the universe where they built it is super fun to watch.
okay, let's do them together. And by the way, South Alabama is sort of in keeping with Alabama and Auburn fans. They've developed a prickly fan base already.
Yeah.
I think I picked against them in
Yeah.
maybe in a super dog or some thing. Man, they got all bent out of shape. I was like,
where have y'all
guys,
been?
You guys are baseball school. Luis Gonzalez or something. Take it easy.
Where have y'all been?
Troy over under 8.5. What do you got? And the Troy, the big game for them on the schedules, they're at Kansas State in week 2.
Yeah, and they host they host the South Alabama game on my birthday. Happy birthday to me. I had South Alabama at 9-4. I had South Alabama with 9 wins and Troy with 8. So I've got Troy just under that.
And South Alabama win total is 8.
Okay, well, I got South Alabama then 1 game over that, and I've got Troy a half a game under that. So I had South Alabama at 9 wins and Troy at 8 wins, just in my very I have a lot of notes I take in the spring, and I got a South Alabama at 9 wins and Troy at 8.
Okay, I'm gonna take the over by half on Troy at 8.5. I'd probably like to take a push on South Alabama. South Alabama's at Tulane and at Oklahoma State. Now, they almost won at UCLA last year. They certainly went in Stillwater. But I've got to figure those are losses. They're at James Madison, which even with the loss of Todd Centeio at quarterback, they've got one of the bright, young offensive gurus in Tino Sinceri running the passing game there. So James Madison's going to be tough. They're at Troy. I'm going to take over only because I'd like to take the push. It has nothing to do with whether their fans get mad at me all, I don't care about that.
We're always affected by that. Yeah. Just so everybody on Twitter knows, we're totally affected by y'all's.
All 150 Twitter warriors there in South Alabama. But I'm going to take the 8.5 or take the win total's 8. I'm going to take the over and say they probably win 8 and more likely to win 9 than to only win 7 because they're going to play great defense. Kane Womack is a rising star as a head coach there. Major Applewhite, people probably don't know that's the offensive coordinator for South Alabama there. Let's do just a couple of other teams. Oh, let's do it this way. Instead of running through teams, you're the bottom 10 guy. You're the group of 5 guy. Who is it that we haven't talked about yet that you are really high on? Is it Toledo, Coastal Carolina? Is it Liberty now under Tim Beck? Liberty under Jamie Chadwell and Coastal Carolina under Tim Beck in their first years. Who is it that you're really looking at from the group of 5?
Well, I think Toledo's got a chance to be pretty good. The MAC is scuffling. You're talking about the bottom 10. I feel like I spent a whole year last year just writing about the MAC when it was putting the bottom 10 together. Toledo's got a chance, but the Coastal Carolina Liberty deal fascinates me. It's no secret that I love Jamie Chadwell. I think what they built at Coastal Carolina was magical. You guys did game day down there. I was on my lone sideline reporting gig was the BYU Coastal game in the middle of the COVID season. I'm 1 for 1 in great games. Never going to do it again. But Jamie Chadwell is going to try and take that funky offense of his and plug it in at Liberty with a really good quarterback who doesn't necessarily know how to play that offense. But for folks that have not been to Liberty, man, there are construction cranes everywhere. And people have asked Jamie, why do you take this job? Because as you know, his name was attached to a lot of Power 5 jobs over the years. He went to Liberty because of the financial commitment and the facilities commitment. And he believes that he can take the next step up, and it kind of hit the cap, kind of hit the chip down at Coastal Carolina. That being said, Tim Beck at Coastal Carolina fascinates me because, again, it's a completely different mindset. The whole coaching staff went to Liberty with Jamie. Tim Beck, as you know, is one of those guys that I feel like every football building I've walked into for the last 20 years, I'm like, oh, hey, Coach Beck. Tim Beck's on the staff. He's been on so many staffs, most recently at NC State. So I'm fascinated by by that entire situation, and Coastal maybe crashing that South Alabama Troy party. But Jamie Chadwell at Liberty fascinates me because I think they, maybe not this year, but certainly in the short term, I think they have the chance to be that team. That he's catching the program at the right time. He's got a lot of talent in the building that Hugh Freeze recruited. So yeah, I think of all of them, Liberty is the one that we're not talking about now. That when we hit October, and they only have one loss, I think they've got a chance to crash that party like Coastal did.
Final year of this playoff format.
Yeah,
and we probably should have hit on a few more teams here, but let's make it. Let's draw a conclusion here. New Year's Six is still quite a feather in the cap. It's elevated coaching careers. PJ Fleck, many others. Mike Norvell made the jump to Florida State after being great at Memphis. Who is that highest ranked Group of 5 champion that ends up getting a chance to do what Tulane did last year, play the Giant and try to slay them? Who is that team? Is it Tulane again, or is it someone else?
I think it's Tulane again, and I think it's that returning core that we're talking about. It's the fact that the coaching staff stayed together. It's the fact that they're playing a very high profile game that they could win, having Ole Miss in the building at the start of the season. And then it's also the conference they're in. The reality is my love for the Sun Belt is well documented. And what they've done to run counter to all this conference craziness to me is magical. I wrote about it for you guys on GameDay last year.
Geographical integrity.
Right.
That's important to them.
Lock down your corner of the map and create regional rivalries, and parents can go to the games. I wrote a column in a TV piece about it last year, and I still am a huge fan of it. But the fact of the matter is Tulane is in a conference that's going to keep people's attention nationally, through the year if they take care of their business. So if anyone's going to crash it, it's Tulane. And I certainly think they're the rep when we start handing out the big bowl bids in December.
I suspect you're right, but I'm going to go with difficulty of repeating, and I realize that the Roadrunners of UTSA are taking a step up in weight class in terms of, and that may get them. It might. They're going to lose at Tennessee. I've put a check mark beside that game as one that the Vols should make sure they don't sleepwalk through, but Tennessee's going to win that game, so that's a loss. I'm going to say they end up splitting with Tulane and they win the important one. I'll go with UTSA just so that we don't all stay singing from the same hymnal here.
Well, and again, I'm about to send my daughter off to college, as you know, and I've already experienced what that's like. Because let me tell you something: if UTSA is playing in a New Year's Six Bowl game, I'm going to buy a sweatshirt. I might go to the game. I might demand that we do Marty McGee from UTSA's bowl game just so I could go there and enjoy it. Because again, it's the best part. Is watching the bad teams play good football, and certainly UTSA and Tulane, they're my proud children.
Where I would hedge my bet on the outside is sort of a throwback would be Boise State.
Yep.
I think with Taylor Green and playing in there. If I hedged the bet against them, it would be Boise State.
And they're a brand. It matters. The brand matters, and they're a brand. And it would be very easy for them to suddenly pop up on everyone's radar again. People want them to be good. People want them to be in those big bowl games, and so I think that will benefit them ultimately. In an expanded playoff era, hopefully.
What could really hurt them is an 0-2 start, though. But if they finish strong, they could still wind up, especially if there's a lot of parity or a lot of cannibalization within some of these other conferences, and everybody winds up with 3 or 4 losses out of the Group of 5. Because the bottom 10, who's the worst team in the country, and then we're going to go. Because I want to end with a negative emotion here. Who's the worst team in the country?
Listen, I also, and I am currently, Captain Morgan and I are currently working on the bottom 10. Not right now. It's too early in the morning, but later we'll certainly be doing it. But it's, I don't want to, it's kind of want to give you the end of the movie before we get to it. But I'll just say that I was just in the state of Massachusetts.
Yeah,
Took my family to the Cape for a little send my daughter off to college trip, and saw a guy on the ferry boat from the Boston Wharf over to Provincetown, and he had all of his UMass stuff on, and he was just staring at me on the boat, and it's about a 90-minute boat ride, and finally with about 10 minutes to go, he walked over and he goes, "Dude, are we gonna be number one again?" I go, "Yes." I said, "But let me go get a life jacket before you throw me off this boat." So yeah, another long year for the Minutemen, but one day they'll win again. And
it wasn't Frank. It wasn't Frank Martin, was it?
Yeah, it was. No, Frank Martin and I did have. I went down when Frank Martin and I've we've had some exchanges about that, and Frank Martin, as you know, is a large human being. So what I don't want to do is, and I'm pretty sure he has mob ties. So I don't know. I don't want to get on the wrong side of Frank Martin ever, particularly when it comes to UMass football.
The opinions expressed by Ryan McGee tying Frank Martin to organized crime do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the ESPN College GameDay podcast, nor do they reflect my opinion, because I don't need a visit from any of Frank Martin's
He's the best, man. That dude's the best. Him telling me stories about his childhood, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's how that went down." It was like Goodfellas. So no, it's I love that dude so much. I miss having him near me here in Charlotte, but it'll be fun to watch them.
I'm a big fan of Frank's too. One other quick story. See, you bring out these old school stories to me. I was calling midweek SEC basketball games back in the day when Frank was at South Carolina. It was fairly early. I think it was his first year actually at South Carolina. So I'm at practice one day, and I don't remember who the player was. It doesn't really matter, but they're going through a walkthrough day of the game, and he tells one of the players, it was like on a baseline underneath inbounds play, and they were defending it, and he tells the guy, you can't get caught on top of that screen. Well, sure enough, they start the inbounds play, and first thing he does, guy gets screened. Frank didn't go crazy. He said, "Hey, I told you, you've got to step this way and not get caught on that screen. Run it again." They do it again. Guy does the same thing. Frank yells a little louder. Do it a third time. Guy does the same thing for the third straight time. And finally, I'm sitting there saying nothing, and Frank is yelling at him, and he looks right at me, and he said, Rece, do you know what to do here? And I'm like, yeah, you can't, and I said whatever it was, caught on it. And then so he just laid into that kid, then telling him, if he knows, how can you not know? And the whole thing, and the kid kind of cast me aside. I glanced and goes, really?
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, man, what am I supposed to say?
You're like, of course I know what to do because I play basketball at Ole Miss. Have you not heard? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's the best thing that could happen to recounting my athletic career. Mistaken identity.
That's it.
It's clearly the best thing that could ever happen.
100%. Yeah. One time, guy at the airport said, "You played for Johnny Major in Tennessee, didn't you?" I go, "Yes, I did." And just kept walking. I'm like, if one guy thinks that, then I'm all in.
The thing is, and I use this line a lot when you're out giving speeches or something, because of what we do. People say, did you play in college? And my stock response is, no, my talent ran out after high school, though my high school teammates would tell you it ran out a long time before then. And I was giving a speech recently, and to my surprise, and just sort of coincidentally, a guy who was a couple of years older and was one of my high school teammates happened to be in town where I was giving it. So I was speaking and stopped by the speech. And so I said at some point, I said, after, 3 decades of being out of high school, you'd like to think you could lie a little bit, but here's a guy in the audience who can call me on it. So, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Either. But,
no, it's the Travelers Rest High School, the Travelers Rest Devil Dogs Athletic Hall of Fame. I'm not in it. And I'm like, no offense, but, I'm not sure what else I need to do at the Worldwide Leader in Sports to get into the Hall of Fame. And the response back was, you really weren't that great of an athlete. I'm like, it's an athletic Hall of Fame. Got it. Never mind. I'll shut up and sit down now.
We know the thing is, there's no point in doing the whole Bruce Springsteen glory days because they'll pass you by. But our high school basketball team, my best friend in high school was a really, really good player, but he was a small guy, and our coach believed in a really tight rotation, so he didn't play much. But he kept meticulous stats, and this is my shot at my old high school basketball coach, who was a really good guy, but he should have played this guy more. But anyway, that being said, he kept meticulous stats, and there were a whole bunch of DNPs in there, right? So his boys, both of whom were really good high school athletes, stumbled across this one day, and he called me, sort of bummed out about it. I said, "What's wrong with you, man?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Throw that stuff away." I said, "We've been out of high school 25 years. You easily should be averaging double figures by now."
I don't think you understand how the Uncle Rico principle works.
Right, exactly.
Right? If they'd have played me, we'd have won state.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. Oh, Marty Smith played high school football against Shane Beamer.
I've heard about that 8 or 12 times.
Yeah, and in the beginning, Marty was
seeing the newspaper clipping and everything. Right?
Marty was the worst receiver on the best team in the history of his high school, but as the years have gone by, he's turned into he's Rudy, right? He's turned into a much bigger deal than he actually is. That's how it works. Just
that's how it's supposed to work.
That's exactly supposed to work. As far as y'all know, I ran into state finals in the 800 meters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as far as y'all know, and the good news is we're old enough. The record keeping wasn't great, so no one can check me on that stuff.
Well, that's why I said to my buddy, why keep your own records now?
Yeah,
what are you
doing? If you're keeping your own records, the whole point is to make it look better than it was, right? But that's all right. That's good.
Hey Ryan, this has been fun, man. Thanks for doing this while Thamel detoxes. And I think we're set to have you join us from time to time over the course of the season too. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it, and it's always good to talk to you. And one day we'll dedicate an entire episode to you and me at Daytona trying to interview Ward Burton.
Okay. One more story. Jeff Burton saved my son from running into the street in New York. I was there for the awards banquet at the end, and my son was little. And we turned our heads, and he went sprinting for the exit in some street side coffee shop or something. And as he bolted out the door, Jeff snatched him and pulled him back in. So I've always been grateful to him for that.
Yeah. Well, and Jeff Burton, the mayor, no exaggeration, one of the biggest Duke fans on the face of planet Earth, and he saved the life of a kid who went on to play baseball at Duke. So
future Duke baseball captain. Who knew?
Circle of life. Yeah,
that's
there
right.
You go.
Hey Ryan, great talking to you, man. We'll do it next time. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. Download this wherever you prefer to get your podcast.